You're listening to the Educated Cowgirl Podcast, episode 18. Do you love learning about nutrition and what you're feeding your horse as much as I do? Hey everyone, on today's episode, I am talking with someone who has made it her life and career to help owners improve upon their horse's nutrition to do better in the arena, to help them make the connection between the research side and what they see on feed store shelves. She also has her own podcast called Feed Room Chemist that you may have heard of, and if you haven't, you should check it out. I am talking today with Dr. Jyme Nichols from Bluebonnet Feeds, who has such a heart for equine nutrition and looking into the future of where she sees it going to help our talented four-legged athletes perform to the best of their genetic potential. I learned so much from our conversation, not only new terms like what NSC stands for, but the questions I should be asking myself when it comes to creating a feed plan for my own horse and more. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode, and you will definitely want to make sure you are taking notes for this one. But before we dive into this episode, this is your friendly reminder to make sure you are following the Educated Cowgirl podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts on. And if you want to get a special shout out on social media or on maybe a future episode, make sure you leave a rating and review, as that is the best way for me to know how you are liking the episodes, and it helps me to grow the show. Hey, and welcome to the Educated Cowgirl Podcast, hosted by yours truly. My name is Abby Carpenter, and I am a cowgirl and equestrian through and through. I started this podcast wanting to make more of an impact in the equine industry. That's why I am making it my mission to help promote the industry to the public through sharing my love for horses through education and bringing other experts and professionals onto the podcast with me to discuss important topics that impact the horse community. So whether you are a crazy horse lady like me, want to learn more about horses, or want to learn more about the industry, you've come to the right place. On this podcast, we will be talking about ownership, horsemanship, fitness, faith, breeds, and so much more. We believe that it doesn't matter what type of saddle you ride in or the breed of horse you may ride. We all contribute to this community to make it great, and that there is always something to learn from the back of your horse. So grab a coffee and get ready to take some notes, and let's get started. This is the Educated Cowgirl Podcast. All right, so welcome back to the show, everyone. Today I have a wonderful guest that has such a passion for equine nutrition, the industry, and helping owners learn more about caring for their horses. I am so excited to have you on today. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, so to kick us off, can you please introduce yourself, what you do, and a fun fact about yourself?
Sure. So I am Dr. Jyme Nichols. I am the head of nutrition for Bluebonnet. I am an equine nutritionist. I'm a PSA certified animal scientist, researcher, professional animal scientist is what that stands for. I'm a horse person. I love horses, and nutrition really is my passion. I'm also a podcaster myself, so I am the host of a podcast called Feed Room Chemist. And yeah, I've been with Bluebonnet for 12 years now. So Bluebonnet is an equine-focused company, so we do horse feeds, and we also do some supplements. Formerly known as Bluebonnet Feeds and Stride Animal Health. Literally, as of last weekend, we released a rebrand and a brand refresh. So everything is operating under one name, just Bluebonnet now. So for those who might have been familiar with me and what I do in the past, that's the new story.
Great.
So,
Great.
As far as fun fact, I'm a serial hobbyist. I think that's probably my biggest downfall. Actually, if you ask my husband, that's what he calls that a downfall. Like I get into so many different things and I get almost obsessive with stuff. So I don't watch TV. I'm terrible at social media. Like I can't sit still. And so I'm always just like picking up these new hobbies and then diving headfirst into them. So like I love to fish. I love to hike. When I lived in Montana, so I did my undergrad and my master's in Montana. And so when I was there, I spent as much time as I could in the mountains. I mean, anytime we vacation, like I'm a mountain person, we don't go to the beach really unless it's like I have to. We're definitely mountain people. Um, like I was a runner at one point. I love, I ran mountain trails. I did little 5Ks. I kind of do pottery on the side. So my grandma gifted me her kiln and her pottery wheel a few years ago. So I like dove headfirst into learning how to do pottery and work with clay. Um, right now I'm like nose deep into off-grid camping. So like where you backpack everything in on your back. Like I've got a good friend that's gotten into that with me, and now my kids are getting really involved in it. So it's super fun. But yeah, being a serial hobbyist is my fun fact. That was just a small sampling of what I do.
No, I love it. I love it. And I follow like 3 van lifers on TikTok, so we're good.
Awesome.
So I get the off-grid living situation. All right. I would love to know more about your background, how you grew up with horses, were they always in your life, and then what made you decide to become an equine nutritionist?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Sandhills of Nebraska. We were actually right on the South Dakota border. So I was on the northern edge of the Sandhills. I guess if you want to be like really technical about it, my house was actually in Nebraska, but like part of our barn buildings were in South Dakota. Like the border literally ran right through our place. So half of our ranch was in Nebraska, half of our ranch was in South Dakota. So I grew up horseback. Like we used horses to work cattle, to brand, to, do all the things that ranchers do. My parents both rodeoed. So my mom ran barrels. My dad rode saddle broncs and he roped. He did a little bit of calf roping and team roping. They both college rodeoed. So rodeo has always been in my blood. I was a goat tire and a breakaway roper when I was little, and I did that all the way through college. In fact, rodeo is what actually paid for my college. And, I really credit rodeo actually with opening that door for me to kind of pursue my advanced degrees, which ultimately led into my current career. So I started out in northeastern Oklahoma, A&M. I wanted to get south, right? Because when you live in the north and it's cold, you want to go south.
Yes.
So I wanted to get to Oklahoma. So I started rodeoing there. My rodeo coach there actually re-recruited me when he got the job at Montana State. So that's how I ended up going from Oklahoma up to Montana. So I finished my undergrad in equine science there and didn't really know what I wanted to do with my degree or what I wanted to do after that. But one of my major professor actually asked me if I'd be willing to stick around and do my master's program under him. And, that sounded great because my rodeo coach also asked me if I'd be willing to stick around and help coach the women's team, the goat tires and ropers. And so I'm like, yeah, this sounds great. Like, I'm just going to drag this rodeo thing out as long as I can. So I went ahead and pursued that, did my master's while I helped coach the rodeo team. And that was really where I kind of started to find my love for research and nutrition. And it just became really apparent to me that there was this big disconnect between what researchers know and are finding out and what the general public knows, like what gets passed on to the general public, I guess. So I kind of like started developing this like burning passion or like this need to try to figure out how to take all of this information that the researchers and the scientists were finding and somehow turning that into palatable information for the general horse owner. So that was kind of where things started for me in terms of that. So I finished my my graduate degree, my master's at Montana State. I then actually went right into industry essentially. And there was a little gap in there where I did some like pharmaceutical company work, but finally I talked Bluebonnet into hiring me. And so they did, and I started in outside sales. I basically was boots on the farm calling on horse operations all over North Texas and Oklahoma. So that was kind of where I started to kind of just like immerse myself more in the industry, kind of start to understand what different people are doing in different regions. So at that point now I'd lived, in Nebraska, South Dakota, Montana. Now I was in Texas, Oklahoma. And so I was starting to see like these regional differences and how people feed their horses can be very different depending on where you are geographically. And so I long story short, sorry, I'm remember, I'm a podcaster too, so I can talk a lot.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
So I ultimately I spent a few years doing the things with Bluebonnet. I worked myself up from inside sales. Ultimately, I wanted to be in the nutrition, right? And so I started training basically kind of like as a junior nutritionist. And then was like, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do. So I went back and got my PhD, and I did that at Oklahoma State. And so when I wrapped that all up and everything was solid with that, and I had the official letters behind my name, I got the official like head of nutrition title, director of nutrition title for Bluebonnet. And so that's what I've been doing since then. So that's kind of the quick, but not so quick story of who I am.
No, that's great. Just, I can already hear the passion that you have for why you wanted to do this and like what drives you to continue with it. That's so great. So I think as more horse owners want to be able to understand more about what they are feeding their horses, whether they keep them at home or with a trainer or whatever, do you think there are any misconceptions that owners have about nutritionists and horse feeding?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that when it comes to misconceptions about nutritionists, let's maybe start there. So I guess maybe I should make it clear. Like, there is not anything in the United States that establishes someone as an actual equine nutritionist. Like, technically, anybody can just hang a sign and say, I'm an equine nutritionist, let me consult for you. And so that makes it really challenging for horse owners to like, you have to dig that next level deeper, right? So I encourage people to ask for credentials, right? So if someone says, I'm an equine nutritionist and I want to consult for you, then the first question is, okay, what training do you have? What advanced degrees do you have? They should have at least they should have training in the field, number one. They should, in my opinion, have at least a master's or a PhD if they're going to be truly formulating a diet. There are situations where I'm totally comfortable with someone with, say, a bachelor's degree, or even an associate's, helping, as long as they have a PhD that is supporting them, right? Or if they have gone through a lot of training or have been immersed in the industry and like have like extreme levels of experience, right? Like, there's these little caveats where there are these super bright shining stars that maybe don't have a PhD or don't have a master's, but are still really good at what they do just because of the connections they have and their experience and what the amount of learning that they have put on themselves throughout their life. So, like, I don't want to totally discredit people just because they don't have a PhD behind their name, because that could be bad too. Because trust me, there are plenty of people out there with PhDs behind their name who also are not any good at equine nutrition, right? Like, their degree might not even be in an animal science related field, right? Like, so, kind of dig into the people and dig into their experience and who they've worked with, how they, just understanding what you're getting into is really important, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And then understand too that, equine nutrition, being a consultant in the equine nutrition world is very different than being a consultant in, say, the dairy world, right? So in the dairy world, people are paying you a lot of money to come in and consult, and you formulate and you design the exact ration down to the penny, and milk production up or down is on your shoulders, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the equine world, nobody wants to pay anybody to do anything, right? So you've got all these horse owners, they're like, we want free help. Well, there's nothing in this world that's free, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you're asking someone for free help, understand that person is in some way, shape, or form connected to something that will allow them to have monetary gain through this, right? Like, nobody can do this for free and survive. So either they are an employee of, a company, a feed company or a supplement company, or they're making their own products and selling their own products. Whatever it is, like, there's definitely a monetary tie to it. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just need to understand what the tie is and then take that into account as you're working with that person. So now there are a few independent equine nutrition consultants out there, but you better be ready to pay some money to use them, right? So if you want totally unbiased, independent consulting, you're going to have to pay for it. And so I think a lot of people just don't understand that.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Because, like, if we go to a human nutritionist at like your gym or whatever, you're going to be like, well, how do I know what you're telling me to put in my body is correct? So why wouldn't we expect the same with our horse nutritionist? That's right on. That's so good. Yeah, and then one of the important topics that you talked about on your podcast is functional nutrition and the distinction between foundational versus functional. Would you be able to dive a little bit more into those and how we can incorporate them into our horses' diets as we prepare them for the added workload of an upcoming show season?
Yeah. So, foundational versus functional nutrition. This is one of my favorite topics because I think that it's just so nobody knows about it. Like everybody thinks of like feed or supplements as nutrition. And that's kind of right. That's partly right. But we can use the mouth and the digestive system to deliver functional technologies. Okay. And so that's where you start to separate between foundational and functional. So let me back up a step. So when I use the word foundational nutrition, what I am talking about is what people would normally think about in terms of nutrition. So calories, energy, protein, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, right? These are like nutrients that your body needs in order to survive or to live, or your horse's body needs to survive. Okay. You've got to cover those foundational needs. That's your foundational nutrition, right? So they're getting foundational nutrition from their forage, and whatever their forage lacks, you need to satisfy those gaps with either a feed or a supplement. And so in that scenario, you are laying the foundation of the horse's diet. Now, there's this whole second separate world of things that we put into our horses' mouths that are not foundational, they're functional. Okay. So functional nutrition is things, it's using things to elicit biological responses within the body. Okay, so a simpler way to say that is it's using the mouth and the digestive system as a mechanism for delivery of components that we know can improve the biology of the horse. So examples would be plasma, orally fed plasma, right? Not IV plasma, but orally fed plasma, joint supplements, right? So if you're trying to improve, say, cartilage or bone strength, tendon strength, ligament strength, if you're trying to improve like the immune system, if you're trying to support horses that are dealing with gastric ulcers or hindgut acidosis or dysbiosis, like all of those things are outside the realm of basic nutrition. Those are functional nutrition components. So when you are supplementing or when you are feeding a horse, you can either be thinking about foundational nutrition, which is what like 98% of equine nutritionists are focused on, right?
Right.
So like if you ever run into that equine nutritionist who is like, all you need is, protein, fat, fiber, vitamins, minerals, everything else is a waste of money, end of story. I get real like, about that statement because it depends on what you're trying to do. If all you're trying to do is keep your, companion horse in the backyard alive, then sure. You know what? Totally fine. Foundational nutrition is all you need. But if you have a performance horse and you are trying to maximize genetic potential and maximize performance, maximize breeding ability, all of these things that we're trying to do with our horses, there's times where you need to pull in functional nutrition. And so to tell someone that, X product is a waste of money because it doesn't contain vitamins and minerals, like that's where things get a little squishy for me. So if I'm trying to work on the immune system, I'm pulling in functional ingredients. Are there going to be vitamins and minerals in those? Maybe, maybe not. Right? If I'm going to work on digestive health, there are certain things I'm pulling in: probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, right? Do those have nutritional vitamins, minerals, etc.? Absolutely not. Are they a waste? Absolutely not, right?
Yeah.
So, understanding that difference between foundational nutrition and functional nutrition, I think, is really important.
So good. And then with adding in functional nutrition, how would that play into if you had a horse that's been off for a few months and it's about to start show season and traveling and all that? Do you want to work it in slowly, adding in that functional need, or how do you want to reintroduce it into your horse's diet?
Yeah, so each situation's gonna be different, right? So each situation, each horse is gonna be an individual and be unique. So it kind of depends what it is. If I've got a horse that maybe chronically struggles with digestive situations, maybe they are chronically ulcery or chronically, have signs of dysbiosis, which is dysbiosis is a fancy word for meaning just like an imbalance of the beneficial microbes that live within the gut. If it's some of those kind of things, there might be functional components that I'm going to plug into the diet, and I'm going to keep them there regardless of whether they're traveling or not traveling, just because the daily workloads themselves can be stressful on certain horses. Like there's some horses that just don't take riding and training and even just plain exercising very well.
Right.
And so if I've got one of those horses, like there's some things that might just go as an everyday. Now there are other things that, let's say maybe we've got a horse that deals with like seasonal allergies, so environmental allergies that only come around during certain times of the year. In those situations, then I might amp up certain functional things just during that period of the year where we know that horse is going to be has the potential to be the most compromised. And then if I'm working with, let's say like in your specific example, let's say you've got a horse that's going to a show, for the weekend or 3 or 4 days, and maybe we know that that horse isn't a great drinker on the road, or maybe they don't eat that great on the road. That would be a situation where there are certain functional things that I would plug into their diet to help improve the amount of hydration that they can absorb into their body and into their cells. And then also support their microbiome and their appetite in a way that will keep them eating through that show. So it kind of, like I said, it really depends on the situation and what we're trying to accomplish. There are some things that you can use on a weekend basis and just like plug and play. You don't have to transition into it. But then there are other things that, not that introducing them all of a sudden is really a negative thing, because keep in mind, these are fed in like literally grams, right? They're tiny amounts. So you don't risk like this massive digestive upset by introducing it to them all of a sudden. It'd be kind of like, if you went and took a couple fish oil capsules, or if you took a couple vitamin capsules yourself, right? Like you don't have to wean yourself into taking like half of a vitamin capsule one day and then half the next day, right? You just take the vitamin capsule.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the same philosophy as functional nutrition.
No, that's so good. Such a good explanation for that. Along those same lines, I think as breeders improve on breeding techniques to get better genetics, to produce stronger, more athletic horses, it is even more important, in my opinion, that riders fuel their horses properly, just like elite human athletes, because they can't do their job properly without being fed properly. So what I want to ask is, how do you think equine nutrition will change going forward with these stronger, more talented horses entering the show world?
Yeah. So, I think that if you look into what human athletes are doing with themselves now compared to even, 3, 4 decades ago, we understand so much more about how things like nutrition and sleep and, environment like blue light and all of these things, we understand so much more about how they affect our bodies.
Right.
And horses have a lot of similarities to humans in terms of, how they function athletically or physiologically from that standpoint. And so I think that there's a lot that we have been able to kind of harness from the human research that we can start to apply to our horses. And so it's kind of, I did an episode on biohacking. And so this is a term that if you haven't heard it yet, you're probably going to be hearing it within the next few years. Biohacking is basically, it's taking these little things and doing them different to make your body perform better, right? And so it's kind of a scary word, but it doesn't have to be that difficult. Like just having a totally dark room when you sleep, that's a form of biohacking, right? Light elimination. Okay. So when I say biohacking, it's not like, I think people, their brain kind of goes to like, ooh, like labs and beakers and, chemistry experiments.
Yeah.
It's nothing crazy like that. But we're understanding now that we can biohack our horses using natural things. So, like uh, lithothymnium, which basically it's this form of calcium that we can get out of this special type of seaweed that is naturally grown in the ocean, right? It's not like this lab produced thing, but we know that lithothymnium is really effective at buffering acid in the stomach, right? So if you've got a horse that gets a little bit anxious and is maybe prone to gastric ulcers, we know that we can plug that into their diet and help them. We know that if a horse is struggling with acidosis, hindgut acidosis, we know that same lithothymnium can actually make it now. We know now that it can make it all the way through the digestive tract and affect the pH of the hindgut. If you want to think in terms of plasma, so now we can orally feed plasma to horses. It used to be like the only option was you had to IV it, right? You had to IV liquid plasma, which you still do have to do for foals, like if you're trying to get their immune system boosted and IgGs and all that. You still have to do that. But what we now know is that in adult horses, we can do orally fed plasma and impact different areas of their body. So we can actually make improvements in ulcer scores. We can help prevent the likelihood of ulcer development. We can help improve the horse's epithelial tight junctions. So that's just fancy talk for preventing leaky gut. We know that we can have impacts in the immune response. So building a stronger, more robust immune system. I think that's one thing that people overlook a lot is like for these performance horses and these athletes, it's not like they are athletes just at home, right? They're athletes in all of these different locations. So we have to haul them and expose them to stalls and barns that hundreds of thousands of other horses have also been through. And so their immune system, it's really easy for their immune system to get run down when they're on the road.
Right.
And so using functional nutrition and using some of these biohacking techniques to really cue up their immune system and make it really robust and make it really responsive to all of these can make a big difference in how that horse ultimately performs from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, or the beginning of the show to the end of the show. And I think all those things are just so easy to overlook and not even think about. And so like, as we learn more, I think it's dialing into those little avenues to really give your horse that extra little step, that extra little edge that they need to like absolutely knock it out of the park.
Yeah, so I listened to the biohacking episode and I found it so fascinating with like the new terminology you're introducing, and it is a scary word because when you think of hacking, you think of your computer and the problems that come up. So, but yeah, no, that's so good. All right, so as you know, with TV shows like Yellowstone and other equestrian events, performance horsemen and stuff, it's really been good with bringing new owners into the industry because everyone wants to own a horse now. What would you tell a first-time horse owner starting to look into a nutrition plan for their horse? Should they start with what they want to do with the horse, talk to the seller about the horse's needs, or what would you say should be their first step in a feeding plan?
Yeah, so definitely for new horse owners, number one, get someone in your corner who knows horses. There is just so much that cannot be learned on the internet about owning horses. And so having a really good relationship with someone who knows and understands and is knowledgeable about horses is critical. Once you have that person, hopefully that person helps you buy your horse, helps you find your horse, right? Because matching the right horse to the right owner is another really important piece. It's not as simple as just like going to Walmart and picking a horse off the shelf and bringing them home. Like you want to make sure that the fit is right for whatever your intention is with the horse. And so that person that you're connected with will hopefully help you with that. But then when it gets to like the actual nutrition part, definitely ask the owner, the previous owner, everything you can about that horse's program. From like what they were eating in terms of forage, right? So were they on hay or were they out on pasture? If they were on hay, were they on alfalfa or were they on grass? If they were on grass, was it cool season? Was it warm season, right? So all of those different levels will make a big difference in how that horse reacts to what you may or may not have to change them to. What kind of grain were they feeding? Were they even getting grain? How much were they getting, right? And when they say, oh, it was a scoop a day or 2 scoops a day, okay, how big was the scoop, right? Was this was this a little cup or was this a ginormous monster scoop, right? Like,
yeah.
how many pounds a day was this horse getting? Ask about supplements. Are there any supplements that you had the horse on? Okay, they're on X supplement. Why did you pick X supplement? Was it because someone told you to? Was it because you felt like you should do it? Like, is it a just because? Is it because you got it for free from a show that you won? Like, why is the horse on this supplement? And that'll help you then determine, whether to continue it or whether there might be a better alternative. Definitely ask if there's anything that's been, veterinary recommended for the horse. So in terms of like, if you're buying a performance horse, like is there routine maintenance, are there joint injections that are needed? Are there special shoes that are needed? There's just all kinds of things that go into owning a horse that,
right.
if you just stop doing one of them, that horse can totally turn upside down. So just like all of those things are so critical. But then when it comes to actually, like, let's say you are purchasing a horse from a very different geographical region, and the type of forage that horse was on is not an option for you where you live. In that situation, you are going to want to make that transition very slowly. And so general rule of thumb, I tell people to take at least 14 days to transition a horse from their old forage program into their new forage program. And you do that by slowly adding the new and slowly taking out the old. So you want that previous owner to be able to send you with some of the hay that horse has been on, enough to get you through that transitionary period. And so basically kind of like what I would do is for the first, 5 days, I would be feeding 75% of the horse's old diet and 25% of the horse's new diet. And then for the next 5 days, we would move into more of like a 50-50 mix. And then the next 5 days, we're at 75 new, 25 old, and then you're off into 100% new. So just understanding that the horses, the microbiome, the bacteria, the good bugs, the beneficial things that live within that horse's gut, that's what we're paying attention to in this transitionary process. The research shows that it can take 21 to 28 days for the microbes to fully adjust to a new diet. So a horse is most likely to colic or have digestive upset within that first month of ownership, just because of that change in feed, not to mention all of the emotional change that horse is going through.
Right.
They now are in a new barn. They've got new owners. They've got new routine. They lost all their friends. They lost all their buddies.
Yeah.
Their food is different. Like, their world has just been totally rocked.
Yeah.
And so there's so much connection between the gut and the brain. And so if the brain is emotionally out of balance or upset, that's going to impact the gut. So that first, month to 2 months of ownership is also going to be the time where you might notice that horse having diarrhea or loose stool, or they start to look really sucked up in the flanks and holding themselves, maybe posturing a little bit weird. Like, these are all signs of problems that can be going on with the digestive system just because of all of this stress. And so it's really important to use some functional nutrition during those transitionary periods to help those horses through that process as well.
Yeah, no, I love that, because we know that when we go to a different country, we're completely in culture shock. So I'm sure for horses it's the exact same, where they're like, and wait a second, I can't focus on what you're putting in front of me to eat when I miss my buddies and I'm in a new environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's so good. So let's talk for a little bit about your podcast, Feed Room Chemist, which I've only been listening to for a little bit, but I think it is so great. What made you want to start a nutrition podcast for owners, and what was your goal behind it?
Yeah, so COVID gets all the glory in this one. Feed Room Chemist started because I was bored and missing people, which is for those that really genuinely know me as a person, they're like, wait, what did you just say? Because you're such a hermit and you're such an introvert and you hate being around people. Like, what just came out of your mouth? But the reality is, Yes, I'm an introvert and I love being in my office and I love being deep in the numbers and deep in the research and deep in the data, but I also need people too. And
Yes.
I genuinely enjoy sharing information and educating people. And I also just really like to present. Like there's just, I don't know, for whatever reason, like, I don't know, blame it on 4-H or FFA or I don't know, but I like to talk and I like to present things. And so prior to COVID, my role with Bluebonnet was to be out in the field supporting nutrition consultants. So they would, let's say they would line up a seminar. I would come in and I would be the presenter. Or, maybe there was a really large barn that we were working with, and there's some like really technical things that are starting to happen with some horses. I'd come in and be technical support for that. Or if there's a veterinary clinic that needs referral support, like I would go do that. So I was used to educating and talking and being in front of people, and then COVID shut us down, right? Like you couldn't do anything. Yeah. And so I kind of I was like, man, I need to keep doing this. How do I do it? And I love to listen to podcasts, and I thought, like, why can I not, like, there was no equine nutrition podcast out there, because I searched them. Trust me, I'm like, oh, I need to feed my brain. I need to find a podcast on equine nutrition. I couldn't find anything. Yeah. Or like I would find one and they did like 5 episodes and then it stopped. Right. Or I'd find one and all it was like someone talking about their product. And I'm like, man, that's not really what I want. So I'm like, well, maybe I just build it. Like maybe I just do it. So I did a couple pilot episodes and I shared them to some close people in my circle. And I'm like, hey, would you just listen to this and give me like honest, genuine feedback? Yay or nay? Does this have wings? And all of them were like, yes, do it. So I did it. Like, I just started recording episodes, and and it was really cool and it was really fun. And so in that same time period, I also teamed up with my colleague at the time. He's passed away, unfortunately, but the late amazing, wonderful Dr. Bill Vandergrift. He was on my team. And so he and I were tag teaming these webinars. And so we would do every week. It was like he would do a webinar. The next week I would do a webinar. We did that for 10 weeks through COVID. So I'm doing these webinars and I'm doing these podcasts, and I just got really excited, and people got excited about it. And so then I started getting all of this feedback from people who were like, this is amazing. We love this. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. And so I'm like, okay, I guess I'll keep doing it. So, COVID, the other blessing in that is that COVID taught people how to use platforms like Zoom and Teams and things like that for meetings. And so thankful for me, the introvert, my travel schedule got a little bit lighter, because now people were comfortable with, hey, let's just hop on a Zoom meeting to knock this out. We don't need to all fly across 5 states and meet in a hotel and, spend a day together and fly back home, right? Like, let's just, in our own home offices, let's knock this out on Zoom. And so I ended up getting more time back in my day because of that. Right. And so I started then using that time to dig into the research a little deeper and start developing these episodes and start recording. And so for a while I was doing an episode a week. So it was one a week, and I'll be honest, that was a lot. That was a real lot. And so I got a little overwhelmed there for a minute. But I backed it off. So now I try to release one every other week, which has proven to be a little bit more doable. There's been a few life events that have happened that have kind of shook that up a little bit, and I've missed a couple, but for the most part, it's an episode every other week, releases on Fridays. New this year though, here's the other thing that happens, right? So I told you earlier, I am terrible at social media. Like I don't even run my personal social medias. Like I can't even tell you the last time that I was on my Instagram page. I Snapchat with like 2 people, and it's only because they snap me. Like I don't ever snap anybody. I don't even have a TikTok. Like, I mean, I'm just terrible at social. But people were like, you need to be on social. Like, we can't find you. How do people know about your podcast if nobody can find you? And I'm like, oh, okay, that's a good point. So I went ahead and I created a Facebook and an Instagram. So at Dr. Jyme is my handle. So people should go find me and follow me. So Dr. Jyme, Equine Nutritionist. If you search that in Facebook or Instagram, you can find me. And so I decided that if I was going to have social pages, they needed to be valuable to people. And so what I am trying to do now is release these little like mini lesson Mondays or word of the week Wednesdays, and just give people like little bite-size pieces of equine nutrition information that then allows people to go in and comment and interact with each other and basically build my hope is that we can build this community of like-minded individuals who care about nutrition but want to understand it at a more scientific level or a more research-based level, and less of a, let's call it, marketing approach, because there's just so much out there. Marketers are good. Like, there are some clever marketers out there, right?
Yeah.
And horse owners don't always understand what to believe or what not to believe, like what's true and what's not. And so I always tell people, like, look at things, see what their level of transparency is, like, understand who's behind the product, and then what kind of research is supporting it. And so like, that's my kind of purpose with Feed Room Chemist, is I want to sort of provide this platform for people to go and have that source of information where you can trust it,
Yes.
And yes, I work for Bluebonnet. The reason that I trust all those products is because I am the one who formulated them. Like,
right.
So, it's not like some company just hired me out from wherever and was like, okay, come talk about our products. Like, no, these are products that I developed, that I believe in, that I have the ability to improve or change or make better, whenever I find research that supports that, and of course I have a team of people that are integral in supporting all of that. But it's just, that's probably the one piece of let's call it that we'll hear people say was, oh, don't listen to her. She says she works for a company. And it's like, kind of back to my original statement, is like, everybody works for somebody,
Yes, yeah.
If you want my podcast for free, you're gonna have to deal with the fact that I work for Bluebonnet. Otherwise, pay up, baby.
Yep, no, podcasts are not.
So yeah, that's the story of Feed Room Chemist.
Yeah, no, I love that. There's times when I feel like it's an equine science lecture, but you bring it down to the owner level, because a lot of the times we're like, I don't know what that glucose word means, and you bring it back to the owner perspective, and it helps that you're an owner yourself. So you want to know, if you were Joe Schmo, you would want to know, what specifically does that mean, nutrition-wise?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great. All right, so for my final question, is there any equine nutrition topic that we haven't covered that you are passionate about, that you feel people don't know much about, or they just don't understand?
Yeah, I've got one actually on the front of my mind right now. So in the last week, there's been a lot of talk about there's a particular company that's exiting the market. And so it's leaving a lot of people kind of like high and dry with, well, oh my gosh, now all of a sudden I don't have the feed that I've been feeding. What am I going to do? And so there's a lot of people that are trying to find alternatives. And what I am realizing in this is how many people are a little bit misinformed around NSC and starch and sugar. So I just want to make sure, I want to make sure that everyone understands that if you're feeding a feed at a rate of, let's call it 2 pounds a day, the amount, it doesn't matter what the NSC is of that 2 pound a day feeding rate, in the grand scheme of the entire diet of 22 pounds that horse eats in a day, that amount of NSC is not very impactful, right? So people get hung up on percents, and this is a really big problem in the horse world, whether it's talking about protein or starch or sugar, NSC, whatever. People get really hung up on percents, and percents don't matter. Percents the only thing that percents matter for is helping you get to an actual weight number, okay? Yeah. So what I encourage people to do is figure out how many grams of sugar or how many grams of starch are being contributed to the diet from each of the feed sources that you're feeding your horse. Okay, so let's say you're feeding 4 pounds a day of a feed that is 10% starch. Okay, that is like, I think it's around like 180 grams of starch. That is nominal. Okay, that is like a flick in the bucket, right?
Yeah.
That same person who's going to get wound up about 10% starch in a 4 pound feeding rate feed has never even tested their hay. Yet they're feeding 20 to 22 pounds of that hay a day, right? So if that hay is, that hay could be 16% NSC, and they don't have a clue, but they're going to get all bent out of shape over what the feed is. So I'm sorry. All of this is like rambling around in my head, and I'm probably not doing a very good job of communicating it. But it just frustrates me as a nutritionist. It frustrates me to see people get all hung up on one single number in something that is so minor in the grand scheme of the diet, and then they totally disregard what the true bulk of the diet is, right? So if you have a horse that's truly sensitive to starch and sugar, you darn sure better know what kind of hay you're feeding, and you better know the NSC content of your hay, because that's 90 to 95% of your horse's diet, right? So one percentage shift in your hay is going to be more impactful than a 5% shift in something that you feed 1 pound a day of, if that makes sense. And so I just think there's a lot of confusion around that. I just don't think that people quite understand that like they can't see the trees through the forest kind of thing. So that's, in fact, I'm so like inspired by this. I'm probably going to release a podcast on it very soon.
And then for those that don't know, what does NSC stand for?
Sorry. Good question. NSC stands for non-structural carbohydrates. Okay. And so you get that number by adding your starch plus your sugar together.
I love your heart and your passion for equine nutrition. Like, I know I love learning about it. I'm kind of a nerd about it myself. So this has been so great. So I love to end my interviews with a little this or that game. So I'm going to ask you 2 options, and then you'll tell me which one you prefer.
Okay.
So appetizers or desserts?
Ooh, probably desserts. If it's good dessert, like, I'm pretty particular about how I spend my calories, but nice. I'm usually going to be desserts.
Nice. All right. Mornings or evenings?
Oh, mornings, 1,000%. I'm terrible at night. Like, yeah.
All right.
5 o'clock in the morning, I am fantastic. 7 o'clock at night and after, like, don't even talk to me. Like, I'm usually in bed by 8 o'clock.
Nice. All right. Mares or geldings?
Ooh, mares.
All right. Yep. All right. Sweet or salty?
Probably sweet.
All right. Yep. Spring or summer?
Spring. I used to be okay. That all depends on where I'm living, because when I lived in like Nebraska, Montana, South Dakota, I was summers all the way. But now that I'm in like the sauna heat of Western Oklahoma, Texas, like, it is spring. The hot is tough on me.
I get that. All right. Jyme, this has been so amazing, and thank you again for sitting down with me today and letting me pick your brain on all things nutrition. This has been so exciting for me. So you mentioned it a little bit ago, but for those who don't know, where can they find you on social media, or where can they find you through Bluebonnet, and where can they find the Feed Room Chemist?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on social. So I'm on Facebook or Instagram. My handle is at Dr. Jyme, and that's spelled so Dr. Dr. and then Jyme. Or you can search Feed Room Chemist in either of those, and it usually will pull me up. So those are the best ways to follow me on social. And then if you are interested in looking into Bluebonnet or any of the products that I am intimately involved with, go to bluebonnetfeeds.com or bluebonnetequine.com. Either of those will get you there. And we have got nutritional products. We've got functional products. It really is a robust source of nutrition solutions. And then I've got a team of consultants, nutrition consultants that work with me and that I oversee and support. So they live throughout the country, and if you will submit, there's a nutrition consult request form at bluebonnetfeeds.com, and you can submit for a free nutrition consult to get connected with one of those consultants if you have questions about what you're doing, or if you're kind of curious about whether or not maybe some functional things might be good for your horse, or if you want to make a change from the foundational nutrition standpoint. They certainly are trained to help you with all of that. So those are kind of the ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jyme. This has been so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Educated Cowgirl podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, learned something new, and will come back for more. But for now, stay blessed and ride on, cowgirls.